It's 6 p.m. on Thursday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. For the first time ever, the head of one of Korea's top 10 conglomerates gives a testimony at a parliamentary audit where he pledges to end a bitter family feud over control of the company. A powerful earthquake rattles central Chile, forcing 1 million residents from coastal areas to flee. Korea's foreign ministry says there have so far been no reports of Korean casualties. South Korea and the U.S. step up their rhetoric against North Korea's recent threats of a nuclear test and long-range rocket launch. The chairman of Korean retail giant Lotte Group has appeared before Parliament to answer questions about the company's complex cross-shareholding structure. It's the first time an acting chief of one of the country's 10 largest conglomerates has testified at a parliamentary audit. Our Kim Ji-yeon starts us off.
Shin Dong-bin has vowed an end to the fierce family feud over ownership of Korea's fifth largest conglomerate. The Lotte Group chairman faced a grilling by lawmakers from the country's two main rival parties during a parliamentary audit session on Thursday, with most questions focusing on the group's convoluted cross-shareholding and management structure. Lotte Group's lack of corporate transparency has been in the spotlight following the eruption of a bitter family feud between Shin and his elder brother Dong-joo over control of the company.
You've promised to resolve 80% of the conglomerate's convoluted cross-shareholding structure by the end of this year. How will you keep this promise?
I've purchased shares of Lotte Confectionery Limited that were previously owned by Lotte Engineering and Construction Company, and the group has created a task force to clear up the rest by the end of October.
There is a lot of speculation about Lotte Group's ownership structure, specifically that it will benefit Japanese investors. But you keep telling us that it's a Korean conglomerate. How will you persuade the Korean people of this?
Shin stressed that Lotte Group is firmly based in Korea, paying taxes and employing Korean nationals. When asked whether Lotte Group will be divided into two with the one half run by his elder brother in Japan, Shin said that would be inappropriate, saying a united company will bring about a synergy effect and raise the company's share price. The conglomerate is known to have 416 cross-shareholding arrangements, allowing the founding family to control the $70 billion group while owning just 2.4% of its shares. When confronted with that, Shin replied the group is pushing for a public listing for Lotte Hotel, the de facto holding company of Lotte Korea, by the first half of next year to help simplify Lotte Group's corporate governance structure. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, a powerful 8.3 magnitude earthquake has struck central Chile. 5 people are reported dead and 1 million people have been evacuated. Our Kwon Jang-ho has the details.
Panic as Chile is once again rocked by an earthquake. It struck at 7:54 p.m. local time, just off the coast and 230 kilometers from the capital, Santiago. Thoughts flash back to the quake 5 years ago, which killed over 500 and destroyed 200,000 homes. So far, only 5 people are reported to have died and 1 missing. 1 million people have been evacuated from their homes. But with phone networks down in part of the country, the full extent of damage is yet to be determined. The president prepared the nation for a difficult night ahead.
People are evacuated. I know it's hard. It may be cold in some areas, but the important thing is that we protect their lives.
Waves of up to 4.5 meters were reported in Coquimbo, as well as 2-meter waves in Tongoy. Both have been declared catastrophe zones, and troops have been sent in to deter looting. Flooding has been reported up and down the country, and is bracing itself for further tsunamis. Tremors from the quake were felt as far as Buenos Aires in Argentina, over 1,100 kilometers away, setting off car alarms there. Tsunami wave warnings are in effect for California and Hawaii, and even as far as New Zealand and Japan, with residents being advised to stay out of the ocean and away from boats. Korea's foreign ministry says there have not yet been any reports of casualties among the 2,700 Korean residents in Chile. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
A parliamentary committee in Japan has passed a controversial set of security bills that would expand the role of its military. The legislation passed despite some scuffles within the parliament, at times violent, as thousands rallied outside the building earlier today. The bills are part of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's goal of allowing Japanese troops to fight overseas for the first time since the Second World War. Supporters say Japan needs to be able to defend itself from potential threats from China and North Korea. Opposition lawmakers are seeking to scrap the bill, arguing it violates the country's pacifist constitution and would complicate Japan's relationships with its allies. Some Korean victims forced into sexual slavery by Japanese troops have filed for damages from Tokyo. The victim's lawyer says he plans to launch the lawsuit in the coming weeks. The 10 victims are set to be seeking around 100 million won, or roughly $85,000 each. The lawyer had asked the Korean government for help, but was informed by the Justice Ministry that Seoul was not in the legal position to provide much help in this case. The victims had tried to get compensation in 2013, but the court in Japan has been ignoring the women's claims and have been returning documentation sent by them. Many watchers believe Japan is hoping the issue will go away when the now elderly victims pass away. Only 47 victims registered with the Korean government are still alive. North Korea says Seoul is to blame for freight tensions on the peninsula, not long after it implied earlier this week that it's ready to fire off another long-range rocket. South Korea and the U.S. have again made clear that North Korea should be prepared to face even more time in the international wilderness if it goes ahead with the launch. Our Connie Kim reports.
North Korea continues to blame other countries for the escalation of tensions on the Korean peninsula. Its state-run Korean Central News Agency said Thursday South Korea must halt all hostile military actions, putting a damper on a recent thaw in inter-Korean ties. Denouncing an ongoing South Korea-U.S. Marine Corps drill, Pyongyang also called on Seoul to be sincere about bringing peace to the peninsula. The North's latest remarks come after it implied earlier this week that it would launch a long-range rocket and said it's ready to conduct a nuclear test. South Korea says the North will only increase its isolation and face additional UN sanctions if it goes through with the threats. The South's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk told reporters in Washington on Wednesday North Korea's satellite launch is aimed at advancing its nuclear weapons delivery capabilities. After Pyongyang successfully launched a satellite in 2012, the United Nations imposed sanctions, saying it was a banned test of ballistic missile technology. The technology used for a satellite launch is directly applicable to that used in ballistic missile development. Experts say that until North Korea gives up its nuclear missile programs, the pressure on the reclusive regime to denuclearize will continue. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Wednesday it may take more than economic sanctions to end the nuclear threat coming from Pyongyang. He did not elaborate, but said he had fine-tuned the details on ways to further pressure the North with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov the day before. And according to a Voice of America report on Thursday, Canada said it will support actions taken if Pyongyang launches an additional provocation, and Austria demanded North Korea withdraw from all activities banned by the UN Security Council. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Staying with the topic, South Korea and the U.S. will discuss ways to deter and respond to North Korea's recent threats during a round of senior-level defense talks in Seoul next week. The two-day meeting, which starts next Wednesday, will focus on firming up the agenda for a South Korea-U.S. security consultative meeting in November and the transfer of wartime operational control to South Korea. The biannual defense talks launched in 2011. The South Korean Defense Ministry's Deputy Minister for Policy, Yoo Jae-seung, will lead the South Korean delegation, while Abraham Denmark and Elaine Bunn will represent the U.S. delegation. Exorbitant housing prices have long been a chronic problem here in Korea, with half of the apartments in Seoul being leased at nearly $300,000 a month. But today, President Park Geunhye attended a groundbreaking ceremony for a new housing project that could be the key to tackling the problem. Our Han Da-eun has the details.
President Park Geunhye made a trip to the port city of Incheon on Thursday to mark the start of a new project that aims to provide more stable and affordable housing for members of the middle class. With skyrocketing rental and sale prices, it's becoming ever more difficult for these people to afford decent housing, especially in the Seoul metropolitan area. The new state corporate housing project, President Park says, could provide a fresh solution to the nation's chronic housing problem.
하지만 최근 초저금리 기조가 계속되면서 전세가 월세로 전환되고 세입자들의 부담이 늘어나는 등 임대차 시장의 구조적 변화가 일어나고 있습니다. 뉴스테이는 이러한 시장 변화에 대응해서 민간 기업이 양질의 임대주택을 공급하는 새로운 주거 모델입니다.
Backed by a consortium consisting of Daerim Industry, Incheon Development and Tourism Corporation, and a few others, some 2,100 apartment units will be built in Incheon's Dohwa district by 2018. The selected tenants will be guaranteed an 8-year lease, with annual rent hikes capped at 5%.
뉴스테이 사업은 침체된 지역 경제에 활력을 불어넣는 새로운 성장 동력이 될 수 있습니다. 재개발, 재건축이나 주거 환경 개선 사업이 지연되고 있는 지역에 뉴스테이를 건설하게 되면 열악한 도심 주거 환경을 개선하면서 임대 주택도 확충할 수가 있습니다.
The government, in cooperation with participating companies, plans to provide 18,000 units nationwide this year and increase the number to 60,000 by 2017. 한다은, 아리랑 뉴스.
It's decision time at the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is deep into discussions on whether to raise interest rates for the first time since 2006. September has long been flagged as the month for a possible rate hike, but conflicting economic data could prompt a delay. Our Shin Dong-bin reports.
The U.S. Central Bank's rate-setting committee has kicked off its much-awaited September meeting. During the two-day affair, the 12 members of the Federal Open Markets Committee will discuss whether to raise interest rates for the first time in more than 9 years. Global economists are evenly split on the pivotal decision after some conflicting signals from the latest economic data. On the plus side, the country's job growth has been improving. The U.S. unemployment rate fell to 5.1% in August, a level the Fed sees as likely to boost both wages and inflation. On the other hand, consumer prices took an unexpected tumble in August. The U.S. Labor Department said Wednesday that its consumer price index, a key measure of inflation, slipped 0.1% from July after having risen in the previous 7 months. Another inflation measure, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, was up just 0.3% in July from a year ago. This is why some economists believe the Fed will hold off on a rate hike until later this year.
Inflation target is around 2% over the next 2 or 3 years. That forecast is not there. There is no need to rush to do it.
Korea is among the countries eagerly awaiting the outcome of the meeting. Local officials have projected that if Korea's lending interest rate increases 0.25 percentage points, assuming the Fed raises its rates, it would result in an annual loan interest income of $1.5 billion. The committee's decision will be announced on Friday at 3 a.m. Korea time. Fed Chair Janet Yellen is expected to hold a press conference shortly afterward to explain the reasons behind the move. Shin Dong-bin, Arirang News.
And in the face of lingering global economic uncertainties, more and more foreign investors are pulling their money out of major emerging markets, with Korea seeing the biggest losses in recent weeks. Our Kwon So-ah has the details.
The stock market volatility caused by the China risk, the possibility of a U.S. rate hike, and the weak global economy is threatening emerging countries, which have seen foreigners pull assets from their equity markets in recent weeks. According to the Korea Center for International Finance, Korea saw the biggest losses among major Asian emerging markets, with more than $5.2 billion pulled from its stock market in a span of 2 months. India saw a loss of almost $3.3 billion in the same period, followed by Thailand and Taiwan. In the past 4 weeks alone, the capital outflow in Korea amounted to almost $3.9 billion. Foreign investors in Korea continued their heavy selling streak for a 29th straight session on Korea's main benchmark Kospi from early August through Tuesday. It was the second longest one in history. The proportion of foreigners' net sold shares also dropped to the lowest level so far this year, standing at a little less than 31.9% and around 2 percentage point drop from the end of last year. However, with offshore investors back on a buying position to pick up local stocks, analysts say Korea will see a much faster influx of cash than others, as the country's economic fundamentals remain stronger than other developing countries, especially as Korea's credit rating was recently bumped up a notch by major global agencies. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.